The following program about domestic violence may include content and discussions which may be descriptive and graphic in nature and is meant for mature audiences. This important series is meant to provide a realistic look at domestic violence, to share information and provide resources to not only survive, but thrive.
It's often said if she or he hits you once, they are likely to do it again. Statistically speaking, domestic violence victims will return to their abuser as many as 7 times before finally breaking free. Now, conventional wisdom would have us to believe if someone isn't good to you or for you, why don't you just leave? Welcome to the 15%, a conversation on domestic violence. I'm Andrew Burks.
And I'm Dr. Denise McCain. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Domestic violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime in this country. We are presenting a 4-part series taking you inside the very complex issues surrounding intimate partner violence. Now, over the past 2 weeks, we've heard from survivors, women and men, who found the strength and courage to break free. Their paths weren't easy. There were many barriers, from fear to finances, to simply put, just wanting a love that was so wrong to finally be so right.
Now this week, we're going to take a look at the financial side of domestic violence. It's often one of the biggest barriers that keeps a victim in the state of victimization. Our guests are career and money management experts and work extensively with victims and survivors to get them free from abuse and on the road to financial wellness. Muriel Garr is a financial expert with over 30 years of experience in the financial service industry. Muriel is also a survivor of domestic violence. She remembers the financial turmoil she faced trying to leave an abusive relationship. She's taken that pain and turned it into a passion to help others. Kim Rim is the executive director of the Training Source Incorporated, an award-winning nonprofit in Washington, D.C. area, providing comprehensive job training programs and safety net services for families and individuals in need. Kim's work has been life-saving for many.
Yes. Thank you both for joining us today. Muriel, I want to start with you, because what we know is that it's oftentimes said that abusers use power and control to keep their victims in place. And we know that that's really what domestic violence is all about, power and control. So talk to us about how money plays a role in that dynamic.
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to discuss this very important topic. Money, they say money is the key to the kingdom. Not having access to resources adversely impacts your ability to have a place to live, to have food, to be able to care for your children. Most women who are victims of domestic violence also have their children to care for. Mm-hmm. But the primary breadwinner is the male that's in the house. And if they're controlling the finances, how much you spend, where you can go, access to the credit cards, then your ability to break free is often challenged by that. And then you have to look at other resources to be able to break free. But then those other resources need to be trusted resources. Mm-hmm. Individuals that understand what you're going through and that are not going to go back to your spouse and say, hey, Muriel's asking for this, or Muriel's looking for a place to stay. What's really going on? Because then in those instances, the situation at home becomes even worse.
It does. And that's really what we know to be one of the biggest barriers, the fact that they don't have access to those resources. And it's difficult to leave anyway, but when you add the element of finances to it and you think about your children, where you're going to go, where you're going to stay, how am I going to support myself and my children, it just seems to be insurmountable. So you're right about that.
And it's not that women are in these situations that they're not employed and they're not working. They are working, but they don't have total control of their resources.
Interesting.
Nor do they have the resources that are necessary to give them a lifestyle, just some type of lifestyle with dignity.
Right.
Most women or women or men that are victims of domestic violence, there's also the mental side that comes along with it. Why is this happening to me? And there's a certain environment that goes along with that.
Yeah.
In addition to the level of fear. So, Kim,
Yes.
give us some insight into the work that you do in the field of domestic violence, and how do you take that person who is either in or fresh out of an abusive relationship and get them to focus on rebuilding? And in addition, what does rebuilding look like from your vantage point?
Okay. So we are a workforce development organization.
Okay.
So we do job training, but we recognize that domestic violence is a barrier to workforce development for someone going to work. And so we have to meet people where they are and give them what they need in order to be whole, to be able to even focus on getting a job or moving up on a job or even going to work. You can't go to work bruised and battered.
Right.
And so someone can come to us, and we believe that there are enough organizations out to help people that there should be no wrong door. So if someone comes to us and they are ready to go to work, then we're ready to train them. We're ready to get them professional clothing to go to work. We can help get them food stamps, child care, whatever it is they need in order to go to work. And if it's something that they need because they're not ready even to begin job training, then we can get them connected with the resources that they need. So if they need counseling, if they need housing, what we want is them to get on that path to safety so that they can begin to heal and to move into a path where they don't have to go back.
Feel a level of independence, if you will.
Exactly, because all too often, we'll get a referral and they won't start job training because they don't feel like they have the safety net.
Right.
So they'll end up going back.
So those other supportive resources and services are
critical.
essential.
They're critical.
Essential to making them, or helping them, I should say, understand and have the ability to leave, even
Exactly.
with the help that you're giving them.
Exactly, and our job training is extremely comprehensive. So it's not just like Microsoft Office and the hard skills, you know, customer service certification, but it's time management, it's financial literacy, it's budgeting, setting SMART goals. One of the things we talk about even with like a safety net plan is, what is a plan anyway? It stands for PLAN, is purposefully looking ahead now. Okay. So you're really making a plan and you're actively seeking knowledge. So you're asking, you're not just asking, what should I do?
Right.
You're seeking knowledge on how do I do what needs to be done. The SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. So I need to save this much money by this amount of time in order to be able to move out.
Right.
So it really is being strategic in order to be able to move past where I am and get where I need to go.
Absolutely. So it's also helping them to be empowered.
Exactly.
Right, taking some responsibility for it. Speaking of empowerment, Muriel, what I have seen and what we know is that so many times a survivor will leave their home fleeing abuse with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And it's a very difficult situation. So, I would imagine that when you're dealing with clients or survivors of abuse in situations like that, teaching them the new skills for money management has to be critical. It's something that is going to give them that sense of control, that empowerment, knowing that they have the tools, the skills that are necessary to become independent and stand on their feet. What do you say about that? How difficult is it for you, or is it difficult, I should say, to help survivors understand that and to get to that place where they are at least mentally prepared to start becoming financially independent?
Well, the first challenge is making sure that they understand that the money that they have won't be taken by the abuser. And so how am I going to be able to set up an account, and where am I going to be able to set up that account to make sure that they're not going to know where that money is? Oftentimes, there are also situations where, particularly if you're in a marriage, if the abuser has damaged credit, you've got joint liabilities, the money that you're stowing aside to help to flee could actually be seized or garnished, particularly if you're in a joint debt. So understanding all of that and then helping them to put together that financial plan as to, one, how much income do we have coming in? What are we going to need in addition to the other resources that we're going to pull? But then how are we going to actually align those dollars so that we have access to those dollars. Who was
What do you mean by that? Align them so we have access to the person has access to them. What do you mean by that?
Well, yeah, I come from a generation where, you would always store a little bit to the side where your spouse would never know where it was.
Okay, having that little dish, jar.
And so the same goes when you're when you're working on an exit strategy and a survival strategy. You need to make sure that you have money in places, entitled in places, so that you're not going to have an issue where those dollars actually come at risk.
Is that a part of the strategic plan?
Yes, it is a part of that strategic plan. The strategic plan that Kim spoke to, it's very much a part of that strategic plan.
But I also want to help listeners understand that there are also situations where the victim does have the money. The victim is the breadwinner, and the victim still doesn't have access or control of that money. What do you say to that person who's making the money, but their abuser is still controlling it?
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, first, that was a great point, but I also wanted to bring up that we all know that domestic violence can be equal opportunity destroyer, and that it happens to the rich, it happens to the poor, and to many countless people in between. Now, R&B sensation Bobby Brown knows that pain well. It literally tore at his very fabric at his home with the death of his daughter, Bobby Christina. He's now taken that pain and put that financial resources and talent behind an effort to help other victims of domestic violence. He established a foundation called the Bobby Christina Serenity House that helps provide a safe haven for victims. Now, we spoke to Bobby recently about his efforts.
We saw that so many people out where we live, out in the Hollywood area have been through it, one time or another, whether personally or, near in their families, and we tried to, we connected ourselves with Share House, and we just really tried to make sure that we give these people a voice. We give these people some place to go, a safe haven for them to get away from the abuser, to get their families, in a safe environment. And this is how we try to. This is what the charity is about, trying to get them housed and trying to get them on a straighter path than what they're going down.
So we want to thank Bobby Brown for sharing such a very personal and tragic story, but it goes to the heart of what we've been saying about domestic violence, and that it can literally happen to anyone, regardless of your status in life. Kim, when you hear stories like that of Bobby Brown's, how do you reconcile that with clients? Because we serve them and we know that money, again, is still a problem in many of those situations. How do you help them solve those problems?
Exactly, and as you said, it crosses all socioeconomic lines, so it has no separation. And so one thing I want them to know is you're not alone, and you should not try to solve the problem alone. And I think so many times they think, I'm ashamed, I don't want people to know, and I have to solve my problem alone. So I think that the first thing they need to do is recognize that the truth will set you free. There's somebody they need to trust, somebody they need to go to, but most importantly, when I talk about ASK, meaning actively seek knowledge, connect with a group, a service provider that can really get them some resources that can keep them alive, that can, to tell them where they need to go. And in terms of the resources, whether it's their money and they're keeping them from their money, or whether it's the abuser's money and they're keeping them from, having access to it, because if they're a bond, it's supposed to be our money once we've come together. And I wanted to say that a few minutes ago too, because the churches talk about once we get married, it's our money and we're supposed to keep it together, and that kind of sometimes keeps people in a bad situation because they're trying to follow the Bible.
They're trying to follow that biblical teaching, and that biblical teaching in
and
some
submission.
way, the submission,
exactly.
and it can cause people to actually lose their lives.
Exactly.
Well, Muriel, I
Because-
was about to ask you that same question. Like,
Sorry,
because, no, you're fine. You're fine. Because if you are a domestic violence victim, and I think you know where I'm going with this, and you have money, how are you still being controlled by an abuser who's living in your house?
You know, domestic violence or anything, money and the way money works in our lives is based on what's going on in our mind first.
Right.
Many people, or a lot of people, stay in domestic abusive relationships because they're either thinking or someone is feeding them saying it's something about you.
Right.
Yep.
And so if your mind is not to the point where you understand this isn't me, there's not a problem within me, there's a problem within this relationship. And once you can get to a point where you understand that the problem is in the relationship,
Right.
this is money 101, then that money becomes a tool or a resource for you to get to the next place versus that money actually, and how you use that money actually being a deterrent and actually causing further destruction. So you can be well funded. You could have money in your 401k, money in the bank, own a car, have your name on the deed of the house and be able to go buy another house, but still be emotionally controlled in that abuse such that you are not able to break free. And then if your circle that's around you includes individuals that have been previously in abusive relationships and never mentally healed, and that's what's feeding into your mind,
Right.
you continue to stay there until sometimes you've died in it, or the abuse is so great that somebody pulls you to the side and said, something's not right.
Right.
So the safety plan, it really doesn't help if the mindset is not correct.
Which is why Kim said, as a part of the multifaceted plan and what she's done, her organization is doing, it also includes a counseling aspect. Because there is that emotional and mental place that comes with being abused, whether it's physically abused or emotionally abused. That's how that submission comes into play, in the brainwashing.
Right.
That
Yeah, and that is a real part of it. You know, we're talking about individuals who have lived, you know, in these situations that have taken on many facets, not just financial, but the emotional, the psychological, where they have been beat down and they don't feel capable of living by themselves. They don't feel that they have the resources,
Or
the
worthy.
wherewithal, or worthy or deserving to live a life free of abuse. So you're right, that mental component is a very huge part of this equation,
Exactly.
along with getting the financial literacy, the education, making that plan to be in the right frame of mind, which would include having right people around you, but also reaching out for help, getting the services, counseling services, which we know are also very important.
we often say in the financial education space, it's not how much money you have, it's what you do with it.
Exactly.
So you could have a lot of money and still be broke.
Exactly.
Because if stuff's not going on right inside of you, then you're still going to be broke and you're still going to stay there.
So when you're saying leave, you need access to several resources before you break free. Because when the question comes up, why don't you just leave? You need the mindset and also the plan and also all of those resources, the counselors, to increase your self-esteem so that you know that there's life outside of abuse.
Exactly.
Definitely.
And it needs to continue. And this is not something that you get like, you know, you go in for one session. It needs to be ongoing.
Right. You
It's
got to
on-
visualize yourself later, looking, you know, what do I want to look like later?
Right.
What am I worthy of?
Exactly.
What is it that I really desire? What are my dreams? And that
Exactly.
my dreams aren't tied into what someone else's dreams or even, you know, what my mother or grandmother may have said. Because in some instances, individuals who are victims of domestic abuse come from families where domestic abuse was a part of the lexicon in the family.
We talked about that. It is oftentimes generational, intergenerational. So if you grow up in a home where you see it, it's normalized, and you think that's just the way it is.
And the same happens with how we manage our money. You know,
Exactly.
do you have the money set aside so that you can leave, or is the conversation when you're reaching out to someone that's, you know, in your family or a safety net, girl, you know you can't go nowhere.
Right. And so
Girl.
they say, what am I supposed to do? Something.
So you have to cut your friends off. You have to cut off
But that's
people
part
who
of the
you think
plan.
That's part of the plan.
to
That's
cut
part of
your
the
friend.
plan.
It's easier said than done.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you're not that social person. You only have two people. You
Or
know, you're like,
think
But
about,
the abuser
too, that-
wanted you to cut off.
And that's what I was going to
That's
say.
part of the
Yeah.
abuser's
Exactly.
control,
Think about it, that they've
to put you in a
isolated you.
certain environment around certain people that think and align with that.
Right.
Right.
And so if you're around people that have poor money management habits and skills,
Right.
then you're going to embrace those same poor money management habits and skills. So as you are looking to break free, you need to surround yourself with people who think about money differently, but first they think about self differently. And as you think about yourself, that's how you think about your money.
Right.
And it's not how much money you have, it's how you respect the money.
Right.
And if you respect the money will respect you to create a different line of life. And so simply that means making sure that you're saving, work within the job that you have. You know, it's great what you guys are doing in job training. And then leveraging programs, and there's no shame in leveraging a program that's going to help you get to the next level. I leveraged Section 8.
Okay.
I leveraged women and infant and children, who was
Exactly.
called food stamps at that time, while I was putting on a suit and going into a bank.
Right. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for me, that was survival.
Yep.
And then I would leave that bank and go put on a janitorial uniform and go clean restrooms.
Exactly.
Because that's what I needed to do.
But see,
in order
you
to break
understood,
free.
and
no,
you-
it didn't come. No. Don't dress it up like that.
But
no.
my point was that you had a plan, and that your plan was to move beyond your current circumstances.
My
and
plan
you
was I
did
just needed to survive.
survive. So that was the point, though, that you knew that you had to do something different from what you were doing in order to survive and move beyond that space. We could continue this conversation for quite some time, but unfortunately we are just about out of time. But before we go, and again, I just want to thank both of you for being here. Before we go, if you could just, leave our viewers with some takeaways, regarding financial planning, training, career planning, just to give them some pointers so they'll know what to do and or share that information with someone.
So you've said some things, like you talked about empowerment first, and I like the word paradigm shift. If you want something different, you have to do something different. So we have to change how we think about money, about ourselves, and so I think that's very important. If I can think about just some little pieces of advice, I always say pray, but then you have to do something, because faith without works is dead.
Yes.
So we got to do something, and we have to have the plan, and we have to execute the plan. We have to build some new skills and build some new alliances with people who are going to help us and give us what we need, and that means we have to be honest with what we know and what we don't know.
Right.
And then put that plan in place and move forward and never look back.
Right. That's good. That's good. And Muriel?
I would build on that, and I would say, first of all, that you need to know your worth.
Yep.
And do not allow someone to tell you that you're less than who you are or what you are. Then you need to find someone that believes in you, and that may be the safe person that's going to help hold your dowry. Because you have to be careful where you put your money, because your money is going to be a part of that chest that you're going to use to escape with.
And Muriel, one more question for you though. What should the financial exit plan look like, and what should rebuilding look like? Or are they pretty much the same?
They're pretty much the same, because a financial, we normally tell people they need to have 3 months or 6 months saved in order to do this or in order to do that. When you're in an abusive relationship, you just need to be able to get out.
Right.
And that could mean just having enough money to put gas in the car to get to a safe house.
Okay.
But I also
To be able
say
to go
things
to the next-
like for gifts, ask for gift cards or cash, and ask somebody else to hold them. Start storing
That's why I said
some things up.
have someone that can actually store those things
Exactly.
that you trust, that is not going to be talking about.
Or missed at home.
Wow. This is
Powerful.
great. Great. We are out of time, but I do want to thank both of our guests for joining us for this very, very important conversation. We will wrap up our series, The 15%, a conversation on domestic violence, next time by taking a look at life after domestic abuse. Long after the physical scars are gone, the emotional and psychological wounds remain. We'll talk to some licensed counselors about doing the work to get to a place of true healing.
Thank you so much for watching. And remember, the real work to breaking the cycle of domestic violence begins with awareness and having those tough conversations. Don't let the discussion end here. On the screen, you will see resources and places you can turn to for help. If you are in a dangerous relationship, now is the time to get out. Find those trusted family members, friends, or coworkers, get in touch with a domestic violence agency, and make a plan to safely break free. I'm Mandrell Burks.
And I'm Dr. Denise McCain. We'll see you next time, and until then, be safe.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at whut.org. Thank you.